I'd like to take a little time to reflect. Since we've been doing this for quite a while now, I've lost a few people now. So on episode 2, interviewed on the Margrett was raised and born. That one hit me pretty hard because it's really hard when you lose friends. But I was so pleased that I had the opportunity to interview him for the one.
Welcome to the Discover Montcalm Podcast, where we are going to look at the communities, the businesses, the attractions, and the people that make up Montcalm County. Here is your podcast host, Duane Weed.
Hello, and welcome to this edition of the Discover Montcalm Podcast. My name's Duane, your host and producer, and as always, you can find us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook, or go to discovermontcalmpodcast.com. Check out all of the episodes, grab the RSS feed, put it in your favorite podcast browser, app, and check out all the episodes. As we're at the end of 2024, I want to take a moment and reflect. Since I've started this podcast, we have lost some people. I've had the honor to interview people on their business, community, growing up here. And on this one, I'd like to go back and touch on some of those because I think it's very, very important that through the Discover Montcalm podcast, we're actually doing a history lesson. Your business, your industry, your community, your nonprofit all have a story to tell and all become part of little history bits as we're putting this together. Let's jump into my intro on episode 2 about the Fighting Falcon Museum in Greenville, Michigan. Back in 2011, when I was teaching a 7th hour class at the Greenville Public School, the Jacket Video Productions. My class came in and we had an opportunity to interview Bill Delp. And I understand that he passed away in 2022. We're going to go back in our time machine and we're going to take a listen to how the Military Museum had started.
The Fighting Falcon Museum got its start in the summer of 1993 when a lady named Laura Seek, who was the secretary to I believe the superintendent of schools, came to me in Belding, where I lived then, and said we would love to have a restoration of original Fighting Falcon glider, and she said, I understand that you had a lot of experience at Gibson Refrigerator when they were built. Our first problem, once we started accumulating parts and assemblies, which we happened to find quite a few right around Greenville, was where are we going to get a building to restore this? So we found an old building that the Ore-Ida company, the potato plant out northeast of town, let us use an old building there, and we got started.
Tell us about the incendiary bombs that were produced here in Greenville.
Incendiary bombs, that was about the first contract we had, even before a glider contract. They were a small bomb, about 2 feet long. Half of the bomb was round and the other half was hexagonal. And they were loaded with a explosive called thermite, powdered thermite, which is basically powdered magnesium, which is anybody that's had a chemistry class knows that powdered magnesium, when it is lit and it starts to burn, the minute you put water on it, it really starts to explode.
Other than Gibson, were there any other local companies involved in helping in the war efforts?
Federal Mulgall during the war basically made propellers for the Navy, for PT boats particularly. And they made various propellers for all type of ships and boats.
How many men and women served in World War II from Greenville, and how many died?
In the town of Greenville in World War II, there were 811 men and women that served. Of this 811, 27 were women. There was a tremendous sacrifice, as there were 39 of the 811 were killed in action.
In episode 6 of the Discover Montcalm podcast, Cheryl Smith from the Reynolds Township Library and I had an opportunity to interview Margrett Krebs. Margrett was 99 years old, had just written a book about 100 years of change. She was born in Trufant, and she grew up in the area and in the Howard City area. We had this opportunity to interview her. She was 99, maybe a little hard of hearing. We kind of had to shout at her a little bit, what felt like shouting. But her mind was intact, and she shared some really cool stories. Well, in 2024, we lost Margrett. She passed away, and I don't know if she made it to 101 or not. But one of my coolest memories was being invited by her daughter to her 100th birthday party. It was really neat to sit down and chat with her for a few minutes that day. But let's jump back into episode 6 of the Discover Montcalm podcast.
What was your favorite spot in Howard City?
Actually, I have a lot of favorite spots. I was happy when I was a Grand Marshal for Howard City.
Yeah.
It was the 150th centennial.
Yeah.
And I was a Grand Marshal for that. And my family all came for a big dinner that day, and I had my yard full of people. We had to walk 2 miles to go to school, and you had to make your own lunch, and everybody had to make their own lunches. And actually, we saved all the wax paper from cereals, because you couldn't buy wax paper to wrap the sandwiches in, and that was hard business. You didn't eat very well.
You then went off to college, and I guess it was a pretty big deal because
It was terrible, because my mother and dad said, well, we can't help you at all. There's just no way we can. But I got a scholarship from Reader's Digest for my tuition, and I just, of course, I was pretty naive about living, and I thought, well, I'm going to try it, and if I fail, I fail. So I went up, and I had to have a job all the time to get money to eat.
technology is one of those things, I think it's a moving part, because back in the early 1900s, you were at the leading edge of technology. Today, in 2022, we're at the leading edge of technology. What do you like about technology that, as you were growing up, that you went, I'm glad?
I just think what a gift it would be for my mother to see that you had a refrigerator, and you had running water, and you had, like she had the wash on an old scrub board, and think how easy all those things are for you. But you think that your life, because of the technology, has made your life so much easier.
Before we jump into episode 13 with Ralph Hauenstein, I want to give you a little backstory. Right after I had released that, I had not realized that Ralph had passed away right about the same time that I had released it. I was over at the Montcalm Area Career Center. I was on my break, and I received a phone call from one of Ralph's boys. And I'm like, oh, sorry for your loss. And he goes, no. He says, I want to share something with you. He said, we were sitting down with the funeral director, and none of the family could remember when Ralph was a supervisor, what time span, what years that it had passed that he had been the supervisor of the Reynolds Township. And he said, when we jumped in and we watched it, he said, we did a little Google search and up it popped, and there was Dad. Now, the interview I did back in 2018, but then released it, when I came on and did the podcast. His boy told me, he said, that was before Dad started to slip. And it was so cool to see Dad being my dad. That touched me, but it also made me realize this is why we need the Discover Montcalm podcast. We need to tell the stories of the businesses and the industries and the community people all over the county. So here's my intro to episode 13. Back in 2018, I started Discover Montcalm as a documentary, and at that time, I'd interviewed a number of people from around the county. Well, then the pandemic hit, and we all know what happened there. My documentary went down the tubes. One of those interviews was with Ralph Hauenstein, who was the Reynolds Township Supervisor from 1970 to 2005. So let's jump right into that interview. Here's Ralph.
Well, I had a neighbor in Grand Rapids, and his name was Lee Olson, and he lived across the street from me. And I had heard that he'd moved up here and they had bought the knife company. So I thought I'll just stop in and see Lee, and I love to fish. So I said, Lee, I hear you're up here and so forth. He says, yeah, and I've got property on the Tamarack, and I know you like to fish. Would you like to fish? And I said, sure. So I fished the Tamarack, and one of the areas I fished was the area here by this property, and I caught a 5-pound brown, and I got to have that one.
What do you feel was your biggest accomplishment in that time frame that you can look back and say, I'm glad I was able to put my mark on this? What is that in life?
I felt as though the development of the whole township and the subdivisions that we had going and the different enforcements that we had protecting those had developed, and the value of the township had gone up millions of dollars from what it was when I took over. It was maybe 12 million or something like that, I think, and went up to 300 million. So we had good development. I mean, you don't necessarily see it just driving down the road, but if you look throughout our township and some of the back roads and the subdivisions back there, there's some beautiful, beautiful homes. And it was very accessible from Grand Rapids. I think that's one of the primary reasons that it developed so rapidly. And we have such good development.
Tell me, before that, what led to bringing some businesses in and how the infrastructure of what was set up early allowed that to happen.
Well, the Renaissance Zone was very helpful because you had a tax break there. And I don't know how many years it was, but anyway, Wolverine decided that they wanted to participate in that. And of course, they're the biggest company that got involved in it. Well, then it advanced into Pearson, and Pearson had some shots at it, and they have got Sitzma over there, which is the Turkey people. And so it kind of all gelled and came together, but it was a very good thing. I contribute to Franz Magdas, that one man, what was accomplished up here. And that's my own personal view. And his association with Earl Sederlet and these people, Franz was a great guy.
Franz brought through the Renaissance Zone, the community center, how MCC came over and anything.
Well, Franz, with his knowledge and his influence of the business that he was in, is what really put this whole program forth, as far as I was concerned. And there were other people involved, but we had a team of people in Howard City. Number one, Mike Scott, who was the mayor for years, was very forward-thinking. And he supported the fire department at that time. Dave Germain was in charge. And the fire department expanded and did just great. And Mike Scott and the township, they got involved in everything, and Mike was involved in a lot of county projects.
Capturing the history of our communities is important. And I welcome you to get in touch with me. So before I jump into the lead-in for episode 47 with Rich and Cheryl Pease on Howard City's 150th, we lost Rich a couple years ago. But when I put this together, when I released episode 47, it was kind of bittersweet. But I kind of was touching on the fact that we need to grab this history while it's here. Whether it's of your business, of your community, of your organization, of the county. Touching on these history moments is real important. So here's my intro to episode 47 of the Discover Montcalm Podcast.
One of the reasons I like doing the Discover Montcalm Podcast is that we get to capture history. We get to capture who people are, what their businesses are doing, how they got started, because life is short. We lost Rich really too early in life. I guess I can say cancer sucks. But getting this little piece of history, to me, is very important. I had an opportunity at that time to interview Rich and Cheryl at the 150th year celebration. And one of my first questions to them was, what did they learn about the Howard City area that they did not know before they became co-chairs of the 150th year celebration? So here are Rich and Cheryl Pease.
As far as the community, we've learned about a lot of the different families and how long they've been here. Including our own families, which was pretty neat. I knew I could track my family back to 1918 here in the community, but we tracked it back even further. And in Cheryl's family, we tracked it back to where her great-grandfather was the original treasurer of Reynolds Township, as well as all of those families that said, we've been here for 150 years. And so it was just fun to learn that and to learn about the different businesses that were here and the different things that different people did, or the businesses that left here and went on to be really great companies.
But I asked Cheryl, because her family has history in the area, I asked Cheryl the same question. What did you learn about the area that you didn't know before you became co-chairs?
The trains I didn't know. I didn't know that there was that many passenger trains that come through town. That was one thing that really interested me. And then how when they were clearing the land, when it was a lumbering camp community when it first started, how they used the train tracks more than they did the roads, because most of the roads were full of stumps.
So let's talk about technology of the day, okay? Some of the technology was lumbering happened in the wintertime. Why did lumbering happen in the wintertime? Well, because it was a lot easier to skid logs on the snow, okay? And then the logs were skidded to the creeks and the rivers, and then
and you had the spring thaw.
And you had the spring thaw. You have extra water. You dam the water up. You put the dams in. You run the logs down the river. That was the technology of the day. Really pretty cool. Pretty ingenious. And then as you travel through the state and you see stumps are cut at different levels, that's because that's how deep the snow was.
Back in 2023, I had an idea as I was driving through Montcalm County. I kept seeing, driving by these barns. And one day as I'm driving by it, I went, if that barn could talk, what story would it tell? And I went, wait a minute, there's a podcast idea. So back in August 8th of 2023, I had a chance to sit down with my friend George Revelle here on Amy School Road, and we talked about his barn. The beauty of that, as I started interviewing him, it is a story about the barn and what it went through, but it really kind of, as you peel the onion away, it's about the family history that is wrapped around that barn. So this is the first edition of it. And on June 7th, 2024, my friend passed away. I never had an opportunity to share this episode with him before he passed. But as I was editing this, these are the stories of Montcalm County. These are the stories of the people in Montcalm County. So August 8th, 2023, sat down with George. He told me the story.
Hello, I'm George Ravel, and I have a lifelong relationship with this barn behind me. I was born in Buffalo, New York, and my dad, the company my dad worked for, he became East Coast sales manager, and we lived in Manhattan. He was a lieutenant in the Army, and World War II started, and my mother and I moved back on the farm here. This farm was owned by my grandfolks, and they came from Ohio. They were tenant farmers in Ohio, and they were doing quite well, but land was so expensive that they thought they'd move to Michigan.
The barn, you're a young kid. You talk about the history as you grew up, maybe your teen years, and then you also went into the service. Can you bring us along during that time period?
Yes, of course, working with my grandfolks, just being a kid, helping out, stuff to do. Everybody is involved, and everybody did their project. And so when 4-H, the first year in 4-H, they gave me a heifer. So I'd take the heifer to Greenville to the county 4-H fair, and we'd, of course, judge the animals, and that was a chance to be out for 3 days. We'd be at the fair, and so every time my heifer would have another heifer, I would keep the heifer, and so my grandpa, I'd milk the cows with my granddad. And of course, he owned the barn, and he paid the taxes on it. But he very generously, he had all the expense, but he very generously, when we milked the cows, he would weigh my milk. So when they paid, he would give me from his milk check my share of the milk. And so I kind of rat-holed that money, and when time come to get a bicycle, I was able to buy my own bike. During the time I worked for GE, did the body shop stuff, and when I got laid off, I just quit doing that. Just totally quit doing it. And so now this guy says you can rebuild the starter and alternator starter. So now we're rebuilding, instead of a body shop, from livestock to a body shop, and now we're rebuilding starters and alternators there. And it was a pretty big, pretty good business. I had 4 people working real time, full time, rebuilding, and would disassemble them, degrease them, and we had a tumbling sandblast, aluminum castings, and so again, the rebuild was better than new.
So it's amazing how the barn has taken on many different needs over the years, and it's still standing and looking beautiful today.
Yes, it is, and we try to give it a coat of paint periodically to make it still look like a red barn. And I have a picture of it, of my mother and my aunt and my granddad out in front with a team of horses and with a buggy, So the barn still has a near and dear spot in my heart. So the life of the barn continues on.
At the end of 2024, as I do the reflection on this piece, what you just got done watching was George Ravel, episode 95, on If This Barn Could Talk, which basically is just a history of the family. It got me thinking, reflection. This is so cool that I'm able to capture some of these things. And I don't want it to be about me. This is not about me. I just happen to have a mouth. I have the ability to talk to people, and I honestly, truly want to tell this county's story. And we've been doing that with episode after episode on DiscoverMontcalmPodcast.com. You can check out all of the episodes. Grab the RSS feed, put it into your podcast app. Go on YouTube, go on Instagram or Facebook at Discover Montcalm Podcast. It's important that we capture these things and we get them out there. Not only for stories, so I have a story every week, but as you've just seen in these episodes that I've highlighted today, these people aren't here anymore. We've had the opportunity to share their story, their little bit of history that makes up this county and makes up what we're doing. So if you're interested in coming on and promoting your business, talk about the history of your business, your family farm, your organization, your community. You've been a resident here, or you grew up here, you left, and you came back. I want to talk to you. These are really cool, neat stories that make up our county and make up our history. So give me a call at 231-250-9624, 231-250-9624, or email me at Duane, D-U-A-N-E, at dwvideo.com. That's Duane, D-U-A-N-E, at dwvideo.com, or again, 231-250-9624. Call me, text me. Let's see if we can set up where you can come into the studio here at DW Video and we can sit down and talk about your life, your business, your organization, your farm, whatever it might be. Or we can come out and do something at your location. Go behind the sign. Let's see how your business is run, what your organization is able to do. Again, it's about the community. It's about the attractions. It's about the businesses. But more importantly, it's about you. So on that note, have a wonderful new year. Make 2025 the best you can make it. Contact me. Let's talk about your story. And on that note, remember to buy and shop locally. Thank you.
The Discover Montcalm podcast is brought to you by WGLM 106.3 FM, Be More Media, West Michigan Technology and Design Solutions, and DW Video. Connect and follow the Discover Montcalm podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Check out all our episodes at discovermontcalmpodcast.com. We look forward to featuring your business, community, nonprofit, events, and more. Contact Duane at 231-250-9624, 231-250-9624. Thank you for tuning in and following the Discover Montcalm podcast.